What events that seemed important at the moment they occurred are really of any interest to people who were not there and read about them in the cold light of history? Me, it's me. I want to know.
You're talking about me.
And I'm not saying that there's not a way to cover this stuff definitively. I'm just saying I'm not good at it and I don't get paid enough to do it right. But nevertheless, I was very curious about a bygone but much loved Los Angeles roller derby team.
The Spike Joneses.
No affiliation to them. That team is the Los Angeles Thunderbirds. And I knew we couldn't dedicate a whole episode of the Thunderbirds, so I submit this to the Meekly Junk Drawer.
Yeah, maybe we'll do this every few years. We'll open it up, dump some stuff in.
Yeah, I said
every other month.
Yeah, every month.
I mean, is what we do normally not junk?
In some sort of, trunk. Roller derby is not an LA invention, sadly. I can't seem to find where it started. I think it's very much an East Coast thing, but the term roller derby has been tossed around since the 20s to describe roller skating races, which sounds pleasant and fun, but our idea of roller derby, which is not pleasant and super fun, is traced to August of 1935 at the Chicago Coliseum thanks to a ballyhooey event promoter named Leo Seltzer, who had
So this guy was made by Spike Jones, right?
Yeah, this is a character he played. He had experience promoting Depression-era events like walkathons. So this guy reads in a magazine that 90% of Americans, even Depression-era Americans...
They didn't have the energy to run. All marathons canceled due to depression. Walkathon.
So this guy reads in a magazine that 90% of Americans, even Depression-era Americans who were eating rugs to survive, they all owned a pair of roller skates.
What? Why?
I have no idea.
We had to sell my wedding ring and we sold your grandma, but we got you those roller skates.
We could never sell these roller skates. There's a man outside offering me $100 for them, and I just can't give them away. Just keep eating the rug.
I'm going to go jump off of the Sears Tower now. Just always remember roller skates.
Never sell the roller skates. No matter how desperate. If your mother has to sell her body so you kids can have bread on the table, as long as it's not the roller skates. So he finds out that 90% of Americans have roller skates, and he thought, how can I use this information to earn enough money to buy more rugs to eat? So an old-timey event promoter that he was tasked with the job of creating an event for the Chicago Coliseum. So he put his information about roller skates to use, and one day, in a flurry of inspiration, wrote down the ideas of a new sport on a napkin and created the Transcontinental Derby, which is weird because it's transcontinental, meaning across the state lines. But from descriptions, you're going to love this. There was a series of two-person teams. I don't know how many teams, but each team had a man and a woman skating around a track. What I'm guessing this means is you had to skate the distance from New York to San Diego.
What?
2,700 miles around the track, meaning 57,000 times. Think about what he had promoted before. There were walkathons.
Wait a minute. Did anyone do this?
Yeah.
How?
What do you mean?
How could somebody in one sitting or like...
You want to know how long it took? 3 weeks.
Wait a minute. No, they had to have taken break. It had to have
I'm
been...
sure there was breaks.
It must have been like man goes, she needs 8 hours of sleep, woman goes.
Maybe.
He needs whenever.
I mean, if you're thinking about they can't do that because it sounds horrible and miserable, that was the gimmick for, I don't even know what the prize was for this thing.
The prize was a new pair of roller skates. That's absurd. That's inhuman.
Yeah.
That's not possible.
They shoot horses, don't they? Yeah, it sounds like
don't shoot the roller skates, though.
Do not even play like that.
Shoot my wife. Don't shoot my roller skates.
Yeah, it said that have taken 3 weeks. It was 57,000 laps around a flat track. Luckily, the sport evolved from that death march on roller skates. 2 years later, Seltzer teamed up with the sports writer Damon Runyon to come up with a full contact sport that involved points and a time limit. So let's go over the rules of roller derby, because I remember going to one Derby Dolls game like 10 years ago and loving it but not understanding the rules. As it turns out, fans of the Thunderbirds also didn't get the rules. On the track, there's 10 skaters at a time, 5 players for each team. Each team consists of 4 blockers and 1 jammer. The jammer's job is to lap the track before the blockers on the other team can do what is necessary to stop them. As a blocker, you block...
It's like Quidditch.
Yeah. I always thought it was a really BS move that if you catch the, what's it called?
The golden snitch.
The golden snitch, that you get to bypass the entire game.
It's not a bypass of the entire game. That's the only way the game ends.
That's the only way the game ends?
Wait a minute.
What's the scoring for?
That's a good question.
Then why are we even bothering putting a ball through a hoop? Hermione's there with a guy and you're like, what? You're dating this guy?
Hey, maybe I'm confused about the rules of Quidditch. I could have, because they've talked about like the longest game of Quidditch lasted for a month.
Were they doing just laps?
Yeah, they had to go from England to Mount Nesbo. Okay, yeah, I don't know the rules of Quidditch. I don't know the rules of roller derby. And they're both made up fantasy sports to me.
Like I was saying, Jabberjaw?
Jabberjaw? Are we talking about Jabberjaw now?
Yeah, do you want to
Now I can talk. Now I know the rules of Jabberjaw.
He's that shark. Hanna-Barbera made him. He talks a lot. He's pretty funny. The jammer's job is to lap the track before the blockers on the other team can do what is necessary to stop them. As a blocker, you block the other team's jammer and you try to make a path of success for your jammer. Each round is a jam that lasts 2 minutes. 30 seconds between each jam. The game itself is 2 30-minute periods of skating. The two jammers have to make a strong lead out of the pack before the blockers catch up. They say that you're not allowed to hit them in the face. You're not allowed to make contact with their back, knees, lower legs, feet, heads.
Wait a minute, then what do you make contact with?
I'm pretty sure I've seen that like all the time.
That's all they do.
That's all they do is slam into each other.
Do we talk about why it's mostly a women's sport?
No, not really. The Thunderbirds, we'll get to it, were a co-ed team. I think that they played separate. They were men one round, women on the other round, and they're all on the same team. I don't know how it evolved into just a female thing, but I'm cool with that.
You love women on women violence.
If there's points. The rules were explained in a New York Times article by Jennifer Harlan. Thank you very much for explaining it, because I tried going through the
I'd like to
Women's
thank God and Jennifer
Flat
Harlan.
Track Derby Association's rules and regulations page, and it was gibberish. So let's get us to LA.
Women.
1949, the roller derby became incredibly popular around the country, with the sport having airtime on ABC, and by 1953, the craze was showing signs of being on its way to its dying days that quickly. To try to keep it alive, Seltzer moved the headquarters from the East Coast to California. I think Los Angeles. I just couldn't find out where. So in 1959, Seltzer transferred the reins to his son, Jerry Seltzer. Jerry carried the sport through the 60s.
Wait a minute. Cherry Seltzer?
No, Jerry Seltzer. When Jerry took over, he took the derby to the Bay Area, and with that, created a hole in Southern California roller derby. Many players from the roller derby league, like Red Smart, Ralphie Valadares, Helen Liska, Terry Lynch, John Hall, they did not want to relocate. Luckily, they didn't need to. Now enter Herb Roberts. A former skater, he created the National Skating Derby Incorporated based here in Los Angeles, and he created his own league, and he called it Roller Games. So Jerry Seltzer, he had roller derby.
This story's making me thirsty.
Good. Thirsty for more knowledge. Herb Roberts had roller games. It's just like a different league of the same. They're like spiritual rivals, basically. As far as I can tell, same game, different name, but barely. With the creation of this new league came the first team, the Los Angeles Thunderbirds, or as they're also known, the LA T-Birds.
It's pretty cool. That's a good name for LA.
I think it is, yeah.
T-Birds.
The T-Birds, that's a good one.
Yeah.
They had these really great patriotic colors. They were red, white, and blue with a big bird on the logo. Other debut teams included the Detroit Devils, the Chicago Cyclones, the Texas Outlaws, later get New York Bombers, the Arizona Chargers, San Francisco Shamrocks, and the Hawaii Warriors.
None of those make sense.
The first jam wouldn't be held until next year, 1961, and by that time, Herb Roberts sold the NSD to a man named Bill Griffiths Sr. Griffiths really becomes the main guy for roller games, and it's described as a suave former ad man. I've also read that he was a TV pitch man.
What's a TV pitch man?
He pitches TV shows to people.
Isn't that like a writer, or does he do the job of a writer to pitch a TV show?
I have no idea.
Because if so, I'd like to hire him.
Bill Griffiths, I need you.
Don Draper,
boys.
I need you.
So yet another flamboyant ringleader. The roller games, like most roller derby, was multi-ethnic and co-ed, meaning white boys on Twitter would have hated it. Why are you forcing me to look at diversity?
You keep telling me to use Twitter, and I keep saying those things on Twitter, and now you're complaining about it?
There's diversity. There's the alt-right neo-Nazis and KKK. That's diverse. I read that somewhere that co-ed teams will do alternate jams, like the women and the men. I've also seen matches on YouTube. I'm pretty sure I've seen one where there's men and women on the same track doing the same jam, but I could be wrong.
Disgusting. So I'm going to talk about this on Twitter.
And then it worked as hard. All of this about Thunderbirds and roller derby, I've read so many different contradicting things. It's kind of crazy.
Your information was getting jammed.
Like they were saying, like, I'll talk about it after I talk about this next thing. Although early tracks were said to be in El Monte, the first match would be held at a place that would become their home, a place the Thunderbirds are synonymous with, the Olympic Auditorium at Grand and 18th Street in downtown. The Olympic was known for all kinds of sports, primarily boxing, wrestling, as my dad says it, wrestling, and roller derby. It held
wrestling at Fosty's? Fosty's Freeze?
Wrestling at Fosty's. It held 9,000 people, and it was built in 1924 or 25 for the Olympics. Now, during the 32 Olympics, the Olympic Auditorium held competitions for old-timey boxing, old-timey wrestling, and good old-timey wholesome weightlifting. Since 2005, though, it's been a Korean megachurch, the Glory Church of Jesus Christ, and I literally stare at it from Tradetech all the time, and I had no idea that was the Olympic. They played all kinds of venues in Los Angeles. They played the Santa Monica Civic Auditorium, the Sports Arena, the Fairgrounds in San Bernardino, and one time they played at the Forum. They were also the first team to play at the Long Beach Arena.
The first team of anything? Or just
from what I read, yeah. Not much is really written about the first season of roller games, but it's obvious is that it became wildly popular, and the T-Birds were very quickly, they were huge, and they had a loyal fan base. Also, what's important was that the team was very good at the sport. They were packed with former derby skaters like Ralphie Valadares, who was later nicknamed Living Legend, John Hall, Honey Sanchez, Gwen Skinny Minnie Miller, Shirley Hardman, Danny Riley, Terry Lynch, Ronnie Psycho Rains. The general manager and coach of the T-Birds was a former derby skater as well, Marion Red Smart with 2 T's. He led the team to several championships and as soon as 1963, they won the President's Cup, which I'm sure is a thing. Undoubtedly, though, the most popular and still loved Thunderbird is Ralphie Valadares. He was born in Guatemala, but came to LA, specifically Hollywood Park, with his family when he was 12. He was a short guy, and he was trying to be a horse jockey, but I think like he grew like an inch and a couple extra pounds, and they're like, you can't get no.
We don't want these horses to die.
You're gonna literally kill a horse with your 115 pounds. He decided to turn his attention to roller skates because roller skates will never kick you to death. So he signed up for a roller derby at 17. He was first on the roller derby league team, the Los Angeles Braves, where he was called the Guatemalan Flyer, or Little Ralphie. Try to figure out which name he liked more. Little Ralphie.
Little Ralphie's here. You mean the Guatemalan Flyer?
No, Little Ralphie. This opportunity, the roller derby that is, allowed him to skate all over the U.S. and gain all kinds of experiences. And by the time the Roller Games League started up with the Thunderbirds, Little Ralphie was a well-rounded professional derby skater, and he was really good. His wife was also...
I'm Little Ralph now.
Blood all over his knuckles. His wife was also a Thunderbird, Gloria Sweet Honey Sanchez. He liked her so much that he married her twice. Ralphie skated all through the Bill Griffiths period, and he was like the team's all-time scorer. He even landed a role in the Raquel Welch derby movie, Kansas City Bomber, which has a great cover, but I've seen clips online. I'm like,
talking about a bomber soon.
Weird. Many fans remember watching all of the Thunderbird games on Channel 5, KTLA, and just like Vince Scully's unofficial Dodger, the Thunderbirds' unofficial members were sports announcers Dick Lane and Bill Hoppy Haupt.
That sounds like something that would be on KTLA 5.
Dick Lane was known for, like, if there was a brawl or a particularly good jam or a block, he'd shout, "Whoa, Nelly!" Which I love, that was his catchphase. And he would sign off by saying,
"Goodbye, Nelly!"
He'd say, "Get your tickets for next week's even bigger showdown by calling the Olympic Auditorium ticket office at Richmond 95171. People, it seems like people have committed that phone designation to memory, and now when they think about that, they think about either boxing or roller derby. It's so weird, but like, I remember bringing up the Thunderbirds to somebody else a while ago, and they're like, "Yeah, Richmond 95171.
Advertising works.
As opposed to Seltzer.
Go get me lunch. Peggy, go get me lunch.
Peggy. It's a little bit different, but it's perfect.
Peggy, lunch is perfect.
As opposed to Seltzer's roller derby league, which was by some accounts seemed more like a sport, Griffith's games were wilder, they were more dramatic, and they had higher scores. He really knew how to amp up the sport for TV, and it worked for a really long time, but that attention span can only hold for so long if there's nothing underneath. It's like mixing the halftime show with the game. Like, there was a lot of theatrics and stuff, so there was still a game there, but a lot of people went for like the fights, or it was said that some of the brawls were staged. It would put that in line with wrestling, but still, it's not as it's not as entertaining to fans as just watching wrestling. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So while roller games were hugely popular as wrestling and boxing, as popular as it was through the 60s, by 1973, it almost all dried up. What's strange is that just a year before 1972, many people were saying that was almost like the peak year in popularity for roller games, like just a year before that. And it peaks, and you hear about it everywhere, and almost everyone agrees to not talk about it for 10 years afterwards. Like, that's just like any trend.
It's
Amore?
That's Amore. It's Midsommar.
It is Midsommar, yeah. In 1969, Jerry Seltzer sued Bill Griffith's group for $15 million over the copyright of roller derby. I couldn't really find out what happened, but I know that by 1973, 40 years later, Seltzer was out. The economy was bad. People's interest...
We're out of Seltzer?
We're out of Seltzer. It's flat.
That's his grandkid. Flat Seltzer.
Flat Seltzer. You're funny. You should work at Spike Lee's store.
I should work at Spike Lee's.
Yeah, you should work at Spike Lee's store.
I'm going to work at Spike Lee's grocery store. I'm who they want.
I'm the face of that place. Seltzer was out. The economy was bad. People's interest was going out. His own interest was waning, so he sold the promotional rights of roller derby to Griffith. And with that, all of the U.S.'s professional roller skaters came under Griffith's roller games.
It's so weird that like him and Ed McMahon, that's the wrestling guy, right? Not the Johnny Carson sidekick?
McMahon is the wrestling guy.
Who's Johnny Carson's sidekick?
Ed McMahon.
Wait, they're both named Ed McMahon?
I don't know if the wrestling guy's name is Ed McMahon. McMahon is his last name. I don't know if his first name is Ed.
It's the same thing. It's weird that like a guy can own a made-up sport.
Yeah, it's just like anything else.
We are talking about Johnny Carson's sidekick, right?
We're talking about the guy who would sit on the couch and be like, "Oh, wow, that's funny."
You are correct.
You are correct. You ever watch the episode where he was drunk? That was funny. I mean, they were always drunk, but there's one
episode.
Seltzer sells his shares of whatever to Griffiths.
Seltzer sells shares.
So he sells it to Griffiths just before the entire thing falls apart. Griffiths roller games, which encompass
insider trading.
He saw people were hula hooping now. Griffiths roller games, which encompass all leagues of roller derby, just dragged on for 2 more years before roller games shut down in 1975. There was a weird resurgence in the 80s, and since Bill Griffiths still owned the rights,
Vince McMahon.
Thank you, Vince McMahon. I'm just glad that you figured it out in the middle of me trying to do this.
You are correct, sir.
Bill Griffiths was back to promoting this weird resurgence of roller games, and even got a television show back called Roller Games, and it was like roller derby type game.
Rolling derby.
Yeah, rolling, exactly. And it was very informed by the 80s. Have you seen Running Man with Arnold Schwarzenegger? It's very running, like punkish skaters jamming on a track that included an alligator pit and a wall of death. Like, it's so of course it died out again. The final game of the Griffith era was in 1993, and skating the game was the Guatemalan flyer himself, Little Ralphie Valadares,
back.
the living
He's out
legend.
of retirement.
One more game.
Little Ralphie's back. Little Ralphie.
From the first game to the last, Ralphie Valadares. Bill Griffith's son, Bill Griffiths Jr., tried reviving the T-Birds and roller games in the 2000s, but it didn't hold. And with games being played sporadically through the years and then ending finally in 2009. The Thunderbirds website, which is where I got 80% of the actual helpful information, thank you, Scott Stevens, it says there that the team is currently inactive, which is a bummer. Like I said up top, this was not the end of roller derby, and in LA and Southern California, you can still catch a derby match pretty much. I mean,
The Derby Dolls.
Derby Dolls is still around, SFV, roller derby, and Silmar is another big team or big group. But this era, 1960s Thunderbirds, it's been immortalized by Angelinos. Everything about them is remembered so fondly, like the skaters, the uniform, the Olympic, Dick Lane, Channel 5. The way we talk about In-N-Out being this fusion that equals Southern California of a particular era, the same thing with Thunderbirds in the city in the 60s. It's fused together. People's memories of it are so strong.
And can I add one more thing?
Yeah.
We had fun until the city took the T-Birds away. You are correct, sir. Let's get ready to rumble.
I'm trying to figure out if I hated every word of that. Not separately. Strung together, yeah, I hated every word of it. But not, like, I don't hate the words that you said, just that you said them in that order.
Can I add one more thing? Do you understand the words coming out of my mouth?
My wife.
One more thing. Yeah, serious Borat.
My wife.
Wowie. We wow.